first, you know that.
Yeah, you just let me know when you're ready.
Do you have a copy of the agenda? I'm looking for it.
Good morning, everyone. It's February 14th, 2023, 9 a.m. And this is the Public Safety Committee meeting for the City of Isle of Palms. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Next on the agenda is the approval of the previous meeting's minutes of January 26th. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. Is there any changes, additions, deletions, adjustments? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Okay. Next is citizens' comments.
Mr. Kraus and Mr. Klaus and Ms. Kraus have both signed up. I will let them decide who they want to go first.
At this time, I'd like to suspend the rules of order and allow a little bit more than the allotted 3 minutes. I've talked with Mr. Klaus, and he has some important information for the committee. Is there a second?
It's a second. I'd like to, if I could, friendly addition to that, that we also have dialogue with the Klauses.
Right. We just suspend the rules of order for
Yes.
both.
Okay.
That's the only two. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Yes, sir. Mr. Klaus.
Thank you. Can everybody hear okay? All right, I'm going to try to talk in the microphone like Blair taught me to do this. I've handed you a packet of information, and first of all is a map of the resort, and as I told all of you, it's not suitable for framing, but I think we can all get a real sense as to what is going on here. What we have done in the green circles that we have 1, 2, 4, 16, 14, 11, and 3, those are the people, the residents of this community that have a very, very large concern regarding the noise and the nuisance coming from the Sweetgrass Inn. So we've identified the players. I would like to guide you to number 12, which is right above Palm Boulevard. And if hopefully everybody is there, this issue surrounds, this is a pickup site and a delivery site that obviously is adjacent to Palm Boulevard. Again, there is trash, shipping, receiving. It gets very congested at certain times, not to mention the people that miss the entrance, the back entrance to go into Wild Dunes. So they go in there and they turn around, and that's understandable. The issue is the congestion blocks the fire lane. The congestion blocks, at times, 57th Avenue ingress and egress. And the noise that is created from the trash and the pickups, the breakdown events, is unacceptable. It is the situation that we're trying to resolve, one of the situations. If you I think you can all make out at this point the Sweetgrass Inn facility. It starts really at number 12, and it goes north and then northeast, and then goes east to number 38. This is, sounds redundant, but it's a very tall structure. It is configured so that the sound coming from anything inside this structure is emitted directly into the residential areas of 57th Avenue and the Grand Pavilion area where number 3 is circled. As I think everybody is aware, the sound that is emitted from this area traverses over water, which in turn amplifies the sound. The other issue is number 16, if you can find that. This is the Village Garden property. It has extremely wide overhangs, roof overhangs, which trap the sound and then reflect it into number 3. Again, all the sound flows from the Sweetgrass Inn into these residential communities. And it's something that obviously we've been addressing with the resort for over 2 years. Are there any questions on any of this that anyone might have? It's pretty straightforward and pretty simple.
Could you tell us, what's the status of the sound engineer that the resort has hired and doing a study? Do you have any knowledge of that?
Well, just indirectly, my understanding, based on what Mrs. Hack mentioned at the last public safety meeting, is that they have engaged a sound engineer. And my understanding, there is to be a February visit, a mid-season visit, and then a late-season visit. And that's all that I know about that. I can't give you any more information on that.
So they're in the middle of doing their analysis of
I'd say
improvements.
they're at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say they're at the beginning at this
Okay.
point. And again, they have engaged that engineering firm, and they are paying for it. So whether we receive or we are made a party to that as a third-party reader, I can't answer that either. I just don't know.
Well, not as a reader, but I think this committee might be able to make some recommendations as to issues they should look at anyway.
If they share that with us, yes. Yeah. Pardon me?
Maybe I'm presuming too much, but I would presume that whatever the results of the study are and the improvements made would be something that we would be informed about.
I just don't know.
Okay.
Jan,
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I just don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn for what their intent is, but my sense is they're going to be pretty private about it. But I can be wrong about that. So I guess we'll wait and see. And I don't know if they're going to piecemeal the analysis based on the first visit, the second visit, and the third visit, or wait till it is in completion. I just don't know, and frankly, you need to ask Mrs. Hack that. Is about all I can tell you about that. Any other questions? Okay. The other handout that I have, I'd just like to go through that. The architectural design of the Low Dart Hotel with a Hyatt flag results in physical and mental punishment to a number of IOP residents. Said hotel is abutting, adjacent to, and in line of sight to a residential neighborhood. Said hotel's height, acoustics, and configuration creates a wall of sound, and this is not your dad's Phil Spector's wall of sound, which directly emits noise toward residential properties, eliminating said residents' ability to enjoy a normal, common, peaceful livability standard in their sanctuary. Said noise is a result of amplified music at various hours, pool noise from 10 a.m. to late p.m., events with amplified music and loudspeaker systems, supply, delivery trucks as early as 4 a.m., trash pickup services at 6 a.m., event breakdown services at all hours, food trucks, athletic play, and daycare on the green artificial turf surface. The after parties, hooping and hollering late at night around the hotel hot tub and fire pit. I think I just made a call at 11:45 the other night to the police to report a bunch of hooping and hollering at that area. Said hotels above actions are a nuisance, annoyance, and health hazard to residents situated in Tract A, Block D, which is 57th Avenue, and Wild Dunes residents. To date, over 2 years now, the Wild Dunes Community Association has egregiously ignored and failed to help said residents. The Grand Pavilion HOA has ignored and failed to help said residents. The Village Gardens, a low project during Mrs. Hack's previous tenure, design also contributes to said noise nuisance, annoyance, and health hazard. Massive overhangs which trap and reflect the sound. The IOP police have failed to enforce said hotels' egregious noise disturbances. In a 2-year period, issuing only 5 citations. All 5 were during the Concert from Hell Part 1, held on November 4, 2022, resulting in a very low citation to complaint ratio, even with their failure to track complaints for 1.5 years. We have repeat offenders here. Somehow, LoDART obtained a permit to build a hotel without notifying the residents, subsequently obtaining a license from IOP to operate a hotel. Residents contend said hotel narcissistically invaded our neighborhood and has operated said hotel in a narcissistic manner. Residents contend said hotel does not have a license to be an annoyance, nuisance, or health hazard to said residents' neighborhood. The proposed noise ordinance decibel levels of 75 dBAs is egregiously discriminatory and unconscionable to the residents who are located in a dense community. The IOP administration is promoting a one-size-fits-all at the expense of the residents in the IOP community. They're trying to put a round peg in a square hole. The administration's recommendations are not responsible, extremely detrimental to home values. We are not playing with monopoly money, and you have a fiduciary capacity to protect our properties, protect our property values. The NIH, EPA, and WHO state that prolonged exposure to environmental noise above 70 dBAs leads to permanent hearing loss. The EPA recommends a maximum indoor noise level of 45 dBAs and a maximum outdoor noise level of 55 dBAs. Of all people, NASCAR, their 2023 rules require mufflers on their cars for all short tracks and road courses in an effort to, quote, to reduce the noise of the car for the overall fan experience. Unbelievable. Our recommendations: the Sweetgrass Inn be carved out of commercial properties. Said inn be placed in a noise zone noted as commercial properties located in residential communities, only because it is. Our noise standards: 50 dBAs, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. 45 dBAs, 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. Measurements: amplified music and sound, 10 foot from the source of the noise. Crowd noise: areas generally larger than 30 feet in diameter are to be measured inside at the center of the circumference. Less than 30 feet in diameter are to be measured 10 foot from the source, in direct alignment with the complainant. Enforcement: fines, license suspension. Reasoning: Sweetgrass Inn is surrounded by a dense number of residential homes. It is not located in a typical commercial area. The design and site location of said inn places a number of residents in harm's way, not of their choosing, as a result of the noise being intentionally emitted directly towards said residents. We contend the occupancy rate in the pool area is not in compliance with state standards, compounding the noise situation. The lack of police enforcement has given the Sweetgrass Inn a sense of entitlement at the expense of IOP residents. Time for said residents to be treated fairly. Question: how many warning tickets would we be allotted if we drove down Palm Boulevard at 50 miles an hour? How many would we get? Not the Windjammer. The Windjammer is a commercial property located in a commercial district. Noise from said Windjammer is of short duration, not all day and all night. The Windjammer is an icon, and in dark print, we do not recommend any changes which would have a negative impact on said icon, the Windjammer. If people want to continue to pay admission to hear loud music, which is detrimental to their health, that is their decision. The Sweetgrass Inn was not invited into our neighborhood. We believe we are entitled to hear the ocean and the birds unencumbered by the noise of the Sweetgrass Inn. We respectfully request the above measures are in place before high season commences. After 2 years, we do not deserve to hear any more nuisances. If I can answer any questions, I'll be glad to.
We'll be discussing this. It's on the agenda. In fact, it's the only item under old business.
Okay.
So thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Klaus,
Yes, sir.
I've got
Go
a
ahead.
couple questions.
Of course.
And please take these in how they're being offered, these questions, is I'm just trying to understand fully the situation, okay? I'm not making any judgments, and I haven't talked to anybody else up here about the questions.
That's good. That's good. Yes.
I'm just trying to understand. And the first one's the easiest one, under number 8, Village Garden. Where's Village Garden on the map? I'm not familiar with that.
The Village Garden on the map, Councilman Hahn, is number 16.
Right there.
Right north of number
okay.
3.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Right. Here.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I've actually parked there before going to dinner. Don't tell them.
I won't tell anybody, okay?
Do your suggestions here follow any existing noise ordinance?
You know, I think yes is the answer, but I'd like to expand on that. We feel one of the issues that the Isle of Palms has experienced regarding our issues with the noise is the administration tries to keep putting templates of other communities on top of ours. And I think, for example, Kiowa, they have a high DBA of 70. Kiowa is 2,000 residents with 12 and a half square miles. Isle of Palms is 4,000 residents with 4.4 square miles. Just totally opposite of each other. Valerie did some research, and in Columbia, South Carolina, a college town, okay, for those of us that went to college, we know the things that go on there. And their DBAs are 55 and 50 respectively. In a college town, they do exempt the football stadium. And then the question is, well, how many games do they have at the football stadium a year? Well, 6, maybe 7. And like, frankly, again, we want to do what's best for the Isle of Palms, but we feel that, gosh, if they can do this in a college town, what's the reason we couldn't do it here? And again, I think we need to be leaders in this segment of issues that face all sorts of communities.
next question is a little bit more broad than that. And where I'm coming at, my question is, if we adopt your recommendations, would you be happy and quit coming here and talking to us? And my,
Well, I wouldn't see it.
and so the question is, if we pass this ordinance as you recommended, would you abide by it regardless of what nuisance noise there might be that would sneak inside these parameters?
Well, I think my answer is yes.
Okay.
I think it's yes, but I got to have a but on the end of that, in that if there is a bunch of nuisance committed, a nuisance doesn't necessarily have to be 50 decibels. A nuisance could be something other than that.
Yes, sir.
So I think we want to be careful which silo we put everything in. And yes, I mean, we're willing to abide by this. The issue is, this is kind of like the 70-mile-an-hour posting on the interstate. People see 70, oh, well, I can do 80. And this is the reason Valerie and I, we pared these decibels down a little bit because of the way the place is configured. And I mean, based on past experience, unfortunately, we believe if you give them 55, they're going to take 60. I mean, and that is, like, what's the discipline in them adhering to these numbers? And frankly, we have enforcement fatigue on our part of having to report all this stuff. I mean, we were asleep the other night, okay, they're hooping and hollering in the pool area at 11:45.
I understand.
Yeah, that's way out of bounds as far as we're concerned.
And final question, would you consider remuneration from Wild Dunes in lieu of a lower noise standard?
It would be considered. It would be considered. To be fair, I would need to consult with the other people.
Of course. That
maybe they would be averse to that. I don't know, but, we have asked for the afternoon concerts to be stopped from 2 to 5. They're annoying, they're loud, they're disruptive. A number of us, we have screened-in porches that we built so we could go outside and enjoy ourselves. And now I must admit here, and I've been a little remiss, on the map there are 9 orange dots, and those were the 360-degree Bose speakers. Desiree and Douglas and Lieutenant Forsythe were successful, and they all individually take all the credit, but they actually did work as a team, and they got those removed, and that really helped. We can sit out on the screened-in porch now at 7:30 in the morning and not have to listen to their music, and that's how loud it was. Converse to that, unfortunately, we sense they've just turned the noise up on the other speakers. Can I prove that? No, I cannot. But it's just my sense that, gosh, that seems awful loud. All these are removed. And this is a major echo chamber that they constructed. It is a major echo chamber, and it all goes south towards the ocean. Unfortunately, there's a number of residents that get it first. And even clear down to number 11, when they're doing some of these daily concerts, you can hear it clear down on number 11. But I think part of the stigma here is the resort has convinced the administration that I am unreasonable. I'm an unreasonable person, And so therefore, 9-2-5C does not apply, because that statute says I have to be reasonable. So whether I'm reasonable or unreasonable, let's say I'm unreasonable, does that make all these other green circles unreasonable? Is it a contagious issue that everybody is caught from me? I contend they're not unreasonable. I also contend that it's unfortunate that they were convinced of that situation. And I think part of this is who has actually experienced the day in and the day out activity of all that goes on at the Sweetgrass Inn? Well, we have. We have a lot of 24/7 experience. So, like on a sunny day at 85 degrees on a Friday, Saturday during June, July, how many people on the council has sat in the fire lane and experienced an afternoon of what goes on there? I can assure you, you wouldn't have to be there very long. You would not have to be there very long to understand and the continuous boom, 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 and so we feel the onus is on the resort to come up with some creative, constructive ways of eliminating and abating this noise, and they can do it. It can be done, but there has to be a will. Something has to will them to do this, and it's so egregious. They just come in and, hey, we're going to do it our way. We're going to do it our way, and so anyway, we would like for the onus not to be on us, to have to be the officer in charge.
Yes, sir.
24/7.
Okay, well, and I'm very familiar with the noise. I've gone down there at midnight and I've done different things to try and understand what's going on. So thank you for your comments. You're very articulate, and I think we understand the position. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
I'd like a couple of just requests from you to help me understand this. They're number 17 and 18. You state some noise levels that NIH, EPA, and WHO require. I know I did a little looking up on EPA, and I must have gotten the wrong section, because what I was looking at was EPA mostly was the standards they were focusing on were for manufacturing facilities where workers were exposed to noise for continuous periods, and they were at a different level. So if you have that, I'd like a copy of it so I can get up to date on that. And the second one, too, the maximum indoor noise level of 45 decibels, which is about a whisper, and a maximum outdoor level of 55 decibels. I'd like to see where that came from as well. If you could just give me copies of your research.
Yeah, my associate Valerie can give
Thank
some
you.
really good guidance on that, as she
Appreciate
did me. Thank you very much, everybody.
Al covered a lot of what I was going to cover, but I'll answer your questions first, Jan.
Okay.
The EPA guidelines were actually set in 1974, because that's as early as they realized that
That's when
noise could be harmful.
That's when the law was passed.
So that was when they stated that decibels over 70 could cause permanent hearing loss.
Yeah.
The,
85, I guess.
I'm sorry?
Nothing, I've got a noise chart in front
Oh,
of me.
okay.
It's different.
The 45 and 55 are, I can send you the site from that, but they're for limits to be able to have intelligent conversation and be in comfort. And that's from the EPA also, and I will send you that.
Okay,
source.
thanks.
Mrs. Kraus, could you
Yeah.
pull the microphone just
Oh,
a little
sure.
bit closer to you? I just want to make sure YouTube's picking it up. Thank you.
Is this better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My background is in medicine, so I'm focusing on noise is harmful and why is it harmful? And it's harmful to our health. I started my career at New York University in the neonatal intensive care unit in 1973. And these were very premature babies. And the first thing we did, one of the first things we did, was recognize that the noise was interfering with the baby's health. And we turned down the noise in the NICU, and you could immediately see the difference in the baby's vital signs. Hospitals around the country are now seeing this and constructing ICUs that are all closed rooms for two reasons. Number one, to prevent the spread of infection, and number two, to limit the noise the patient is exposed to, because it does affect your health systems. One of the problems that I see is, like my grandchildren come down for the summer. I am at that pool every day. You cannot have a conversation. The noise does not need to be that loud. The noise from the music. Music is fine, but it doesn't need to be as loud as it is at the resort during the summer months, during the day. If we're measuring noise at the perimeter of the hotel line, that noise is virtually in my bedroom, my living room, and my porch at 257th Avenue on the corner of 57th and Palm. As I said before, we purchased that property, and it was really going to be our dream home to have bedrooms for all of our grandchildren. And the noise has, when I've been over there all the time, has been the issue that we put it on the market. We've had people come to look at the house who cited the noise from the hotel. I don't feel that 75 decibels should even be considered remotely, because it's a known fact that contributes to permanent hearing loss, prolonged exposure to it. I'd like to know why the hotel feels they believe to have noise at a certain level. I just spent a week in Canada during Winter Carnival, where thousands of people descend on the city, and they have outdoor music. And the outdoor music was piped in at a very lovely level. We were able to talk. Every restaurant we went to that had entertainment, the entertainment was quiet and in the background, and it was very enjoyable. I don't think it needs to be as loud as the hotel thinks it needs to be. And I respectfully disagree with you, Jen, that 45 is a whisper on some sound charts, but it's not on all of them.
Well, the one that we should use.
Okay. What are you using?
It's a DBA scale, and the DBA scales that we're using, noise measurements charts, which maybe have been updated since 1974, give noise levels that range from 30 to 140 decibels. And the one that I've got here that we passed out at one of our earlier meetings, sounds above 85 decibels are harmful. 40 decibels, 60 decibels is what is normal conversation and background music would be at 60. Wow. So something less than that, what you have is quiet, like you'd want at home. Yeah. And whisper is 45. So when we're looking at ranges, first of all, we don't want to control what people are doing inside their homes. And secondly, we want it to be reasonable in what we're doing. And that's what we're grappling with. So if we can get within that range of what's acceptable and look at other communities, comparable communities, and what they use as a range, then you get into an area where we can actually speak with, I think, with integrity when we're talking to somebody like the resort and asking them to make concessions. And you'll hear us today make some discussions about
I think that the difference here is that the hotel is, when we, as residents, we live in Wild Dunes, went on.
The mic is off?
She hit the button on lock. You muted it.
What do I do?
When you grabbed it, it muted it.
Oh.
Yeah, if you can avoid touching the mic, that way.
But, yeah.
Okay. When we went on a tour of the hotel, when they offered the pre-opening hotel to residents, our tour guide proudly announced to our group, including my husband, that the hotel was specifically designed to direct all the noise and trash away from the residents of Wild Dunes. That was our first aha moment, that this might be a problem.
I can believe that.
And I think what's really different is that this hotel is in a residential neighborhood. I'm familiar with Kiowa. They don't have a situation like that, where they have a commercial property that is totally directed its noise towards a residential neighborhood.
I'd just like to say one more thing, and that is,
Yeah.
you can get a decibel meter on your phone that's relatively accurate. We wouldn't be using this for measurements with the enforcement.
Yeah.
But it'll give you an idea of what normal noise levels are, so you can judge for yourself.
No, I have one on my
Okay.
phone.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I don't find it to be super accurate in certain situations, but yeah, I don't have a meter, so I use it as a guideline.
And we do recognize it does not talk about the loud
Right,
bass
the
levels and
bass level
stuff.
and the drums, yeah.
Even the DBA level, measurement that we're doing is, does not really account for that. That's a whole different ball of wax that I think we will try the next iteration of maybe our noise ordinance can address that.
I think the thing that I personally object to most is the measurement at the extreme perimeter of the hotel. This is off again.
Yep.
Of the hotel property, because it is so close to the residential houses. Another thing that I noticed.
It's not, nothing has changed, I'm sure it's doing.
I didn't touch it.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Should I keep talking?
Yeah.
Do we have a portable mic or something that we can use?
You want to just come sit right here in my chair?
Oh, yeah.
It's more comfortable than standing anyway.
One thing that we found is the hotel is not good at monitoring situations where noise is going on and no one is there. My husband's a long-distance runner, and he runs out of Wild Dunes down to Harris Teeter and back down Palm Boulevard. He heard he heard noise one night coming from the hotel before he had made the turn on 42nd Street. He thought there was a riot going on. And when he finally got to the hotel, it was a football game on an outdoor speaker with absolutely nobody there. I've asked when we've been at the hotel in the summer with the grandchildren and it's getting kind of loud, I've asked them if they could turn down the music a little bit, but I've never had a positive response from that. That's about it. I mean, it's just a different situation because the hotel is built in a residential neighborhood. I would love to live in that house, I really would, but the noise is something that I can't tolerate unless it's better controlled.
Thank you, Ms. Krause.
Thanks.
Thank you both for speaking today. This has been batted around for a couple of years, but I thought it was time to hear from the people that's most affected by the noise coming from the resort.
Excuse me.
We'll now move on to old business, which would be a discussion of changes to the noise ordinance.
In your packets, we've included the version that was reviewed by the city attorney. There are some suggested changes there for your for discussion and consideration. As we all know, this is a work in progress. We've been working on this for several months now, trying to find a reasonable solution that works for the residents that you've heard about. So. I would like to get your reaction in that on the version that city attorney gave us at the last meeting. We did not have that to present to you all, so now that we do, I wanted to bring that forward. The city attorney is going to be at your February 28th meeting to provide some background and legal advice on this ordinance or whatever other version you all want to discuss with him. This is somewhat different in some provisions, different from what you've already looked. The original version included two different distinctions and thresholds for maximum decibel levels based on residential and commercially zoned, commercially used properties. This version from the city attorney just has one that would apply across the board, with the exception of GC2, which is our entertainment commercial district. That stays the same. The city attorney has an interesting perspective. He indicated to us that he was working on mediating a case in Kiowa related to their noise ordinance, and as such has done a lot of research on this topic. So I think it'll be insightful to hear from him at the February 28th meeting. But again, I just wanted to present what we've received from him. As you can see, there is a section in the draft ordinance that would allow individual property owners or the resort in this case to apply for council approval of exceptions that would allow them to go up whatever threshold is ultimately decided, and limits that to about 15 hours a year. Again, this is just for discussion purposes and again, getting your reaction on what you'd like to see. This version, as you can see, also increases the dB limits from what we had done before, increase them by, I think, 5. Again, this is a work in progress. We're doing, continuing to do a lot of research on different decibel readings and their locations. But
It's 10.
yeah, from 60 to 70. But that would be across the board, would apply to everyone.
And then it reduces in the commercial area. It's a reduction in the commercial area by 5 decibels, from 75 to 70,
Correct.
and an increase in residential areas from 60
To 70. Yes, that's again the version we received, and
Yeah.
we'll hear more about the reasoning on that. But are there any questions, any changes that you would like to see from from this version? Again, we're not discounting the other version. This is just a different version that we received from the city attorney after he reviewed it.
I have some questions about, it seems to be there's at least 2 different ways to measure these decibels. And she has one set of criteria, you have another. What set of criteria are we using to determine these decibels? Or are they just coming from other cities? And back to Mr. Klaus's point about Columbia as being, I'd just like to get, some clarification on the measurements. This here says 85 decibels, and his information seems to indicate that Columbia is like 55?
We have not reviewed the City of Columbia's ordinance. We have looked at other communities. I don't have in front of me some of the documentation we've provided to the committee in the past, and I can't tell the source of the DB. I think Councilmember Anderson has copies of those.
This is the chart one of the charts that was passed out earlier to us, and this is another one. It just describes
Yeah, I've seen this.
the different levels,
Yeah.
with 60 being normal conversation and 85 being the sound above which noise can be harmful. And that's the differences between sustained noise levels and short noise levels. So,
Where's this from? What's the source of this?
I don't have it in front of me. I can't.
Comparative examples of noise levels that we've been using
Chief,
This one,
That-
this
that
one
was-
is on
From the CDC.
WebMD. is
CD, I
this
think,
Table, that one, I think they're all, is it
I think
ANSI?
WebMD we've used and CDC. The CDC has some guidance. And I think the one you have, Councilmember Hahn, comes from that. We pulled that a while ago when we started this conversation, so we can go review that again. But again, EPA has some guidelines. CDC has some guidelines.
But the guidelines that I read from EPA were focused on workplace environments. And they were concerned about someone working in a factory for long periods of time going deaf from the noise of machinery.
Sure.
One thing I also
Which is
wanted to.
Ambient noise outdoors and in residential.
But the maximum decibel level of 85 for a commercial zone is, according to this, I don't know, according to this, is equivalent to a food blender. I'd go crazy if I had a food blender running in my house continuously.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, and I guess that comes back to, we're shooting in the dark a little bit on how all of this works, and we're going to have to make some best guesses and then revisit this.
Well, I think what we were talking about before, Blair, was, I think you were part of that conversation too, is the decibel level when Windjammer had a band at the Holiday Fest outdoors. I measured just with my phone, but it was at 85 decibels. So what you're talking about with a concert, outdoor concert at 85 decibels is loud. Indoors, I didn't measure indoors at theirs, but the 85 decibel level we were using for Front Beach area was because of Windjammer, and I think you're the one that said that was
sure.
reasonable for there. So the area of the Sweetgrass Inn at Wild Dunes, we all acknowledge is different from Front Beach. Front Beach was designated a commercial area from its inception. Any residences around it came in with the knowledge that they were adjacent to a commercial area, as you very well pointed out.
Some of
And
those
so-
houses were built that were zoned commercial.
Okay.
They're
Yeah.
houses right across the street, zoned
Yeah.
commercial, but they built anyway.
So we acknowledge that Sweetgrass, the commercial
Yeah,
area
without question.
outside of Front Beach, areas are different. That's the Breach Inlet area, the shopping center. Is that Front Beach, the shopping center? That's not considered part of the
It
Front
is
Beach.
part of GC2.
It is GC2, okay. So we're talking about just Breach Inlet.
GC1, I'm sorry, GC1.
It's
It's
GC1,
it's a commercial zone. We have,
but it's not
three.
Front Beach, it's not GC2,
correct. GC2 is just Front Beach.
yeah. And what would be appropriate for noise in those areas? The marina area, Breach Inlet, and then what we're calling it the commercial uses at these locations, so that it designates that even in a the planned development district that we have in Wild Dunes, the commercial area could be considered subject to any kind of requirements for noise limitation.
I also wanted to point out that we have a member of our planning commission who is a sound engineer. And Douglas has been having some discussions with him and getting his reaction to the noise ordinance. So I think hopefully we have those comments back by your February 28th council meeting. But that's another resource that we're tapping into to
Definitely, yeah.
get some reaction about what reasonable sound levels are and make sure that we have something that's enforceable.
Well, to Jan's point, which I think is well taken, I think we have two distinct areas that we need that are completely different. We have the Sweetgrass Inn, and then we have the Front Beach area, which is mostly GC2. I think Acme's GC3 or something. It's different from, but that's Acme. They don't have music or anything. But I don't see anywhere in this draft that this is going to address two specific areas or uses, which I think is important.
So you like the previous version that had a separate distinction on commercially used properties, even though there may not be in a commercially zoned area, commercially used properties having a different threshold for those versus another one for
Yes.
residential and another one for the GC2.
Okay, I'd like to say one thing. I mean, is that what you're talking about? Because what I liked with the legal edits that we just got, I have a couple of problems with that. With respect to the commercial, I think it needs to be a separate area. And what Mac did suggest is that we could just have a carve out as an exception for like the Windjam for the GC2 area, so that it just, Blair, maybe you can address that, as to whether legally would it be better to have a commercial designation for the whole island and then just say that one area is an exception to this, or would it be better to have two separate?
I'd
Categories.
defer to Mac on that. I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that question.
GC2 is still carved out in the version you have in your packets.
Yeah.
There's an exception for that zone,
Yeah.
and the decibel threshold for that, it would be 85. So that hasn't changed from the previous version you had
So
seen.
that's just a technicality. Okay, my problem is with what the legal changes were, is that I believe you mentioned that he thought it was difficult if there was two different levels of
Enforcement,
noise
yeah.
for residential and commercial. And my research, and I've got the ordinances in front of me from several other larger municipalities that have these issues, is that they do have different levels for a residential area and a commercial. The biggest problem with that is the one that we grappled with before, and that is, what do you do when you have a residential area that's adjacent to a commercial area at that boundary line, which is exactly what your problem is that you've been talking about. How do we measure it? What is the control? Is it the requirement for a residential facility, or is it the requirement for a commercial facility? By having just blanket across the board one noise level for the whole island, you don't get into that problem. But that is a problem I think we have to solve. We can't ignore it because otherwise the noise level that's recommended in the revised draft is too high for residential areas, in my opinion, and too low for commercial areas. So nobody's happy.
That makes everybody happy. Chief Cornett, do you have any comments on the draft enforceability or anything else?
No, sir. I think everything I've read in here is very much enforceable. It gives the exception for the council to give the permits.
Yeah.
It lays out the guidelines for those that we would just look for you guys and the guidance on the decibel level.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion?
One more thing I would recommend is that there have been some comments from the resort, specifically Terry Hack's email, and one of them I think we should consider is that we had exceptions for exceeding the decibel, whatever the required decibel level is, for so many hours a year.
Yeah.
She commented that may be too difficult for them to achieve, that it might be better to use a different criteria, metric like so many days per year. And we could still limit, I think, the time on those days that the music could be allowed. But I
So
think we need to.
what's the difference? Besides the number of hours? I mean, I think it's 15, isn't it?
Whatever it is, I think we need to sit down with the resort and find out what their issue is with that, because I don't want to make that decision without it being an informed decision.
Well, it would be nice if we could get them to come and talk to us like the residents are. You know, I
Well,
mean, it'd be nice.
she's come to some of our meetings. She's out of town today, but she
I
has
may have
been to a
missed
couple of
a
our meetings.
meeting, but I rarely miss meetings, but I don't remember talking to her about noise ordinance. I know zoning issues and things like that, she's talked to us.
She-
You talk about Ms. Hack, right?
Right. She came to one of our meetings about that. So, and we've just been talking about it in the last two meetings. So she has.
but it's been going on for a couple of years.
Well,
So it's time to stay on
yes,
it.
yeah. So we have someone now who's paying attention. I think we may need to use that resource.
I met with her, but I would like to have whatever future meetings we have with her recorded in a part
Right.
of the official record.
Correct.
Okay, anything else on this issue?
No, sir.
There being none, we'll move on to new business. And Mr. Hahn talked to me and asked me to put on the agenda parking plan ideas. So I'm just gonna turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's talk about first, what is it we're talking about here with the parking plan? I think I had a
Well, that's
different
what I'm.
idea.
What I'm getting ready to say.
Just getting ready to say.
All right,
I've had conversations with a number of residents about short-term rentals. And,
okay.
and at the end of the day with short-term rentals, the answer was traffic on the island and the congestion on Palm Boulevard getting around the island, getting off the island. And that was what was driving the short-term rental argument, because we have three different things that are causing traffic right now. One is construction, which is rampant on the island right now. Two is day visitors during the summer, and three is short-term rentals. And their position was they can't do anything with the first two, so they wanted to attack the third one. To that end, I agree that we got to do something with parking, and we got to do something with traffic. And I would like for the city to look at hiring a vendor to handle parking, and for us to look at charging for parking island-wide for day visitors on the island, with the exception of the city-owned parking lot, make that free, so that we are driving business to the commercial area, to our businesses. And we can argue, at a later date, or discuss at a later date, how much we charge for the parking, if there's going to be a limit in hours on the parking. But that would drive traffic to where it belongs, which is in the commercial district, instead of driving traffic into the residential area.
there is one thing about making something free. People overuse it for the wrong reasons. There was a bus system that they opened up in Chapel Hill when I was there, and for the first month they made it free. And all they got were teenagers after school riding the bus all afternoon. It didn't work. They charged a quarter and the teenagers went away. So you need to have some sort of a fee if it's a lot that you want to be used for day visitors to the beach and not just people hanging out for the wrong
Well,
reasons.
and that's what we have on Palm Boulevard right now. The point is, we're shifting free parking away from Palm Boulevard and putting it in the commercial district. Whether it's free or it's a quarter, I don't care, but we're trying to push parking where it belongs, which
Yeah.
is in the commercial district of the island. And we would take the load off of Chief Cornett so that he can focus on other issues. If we have a private vendor that is writing parking tickets and policing that part of the island, which, as we all know, in the summer is just chaotic, I think is the best way to say it.
I'd like to talk about the parking issues with short-term rentals. And what that means is when you have people staying at a house, how many cars can be parked on the lot? How many overflow do you have? And where do they go? And what's happening with that? So when you say short-term rentals, I'd rather go at it that way.
Well, right now, I'm wanting to talk about Palm Boulevard. That also.
Okay, so-
But we have
Mr.
house
Chair, how do you
parties
want to
and we-
deal with this?
Well, I recognized him initially to hear out his ideas.
Okay,
And I don't think he's finished.
okay.
So, but it spills over into short-term rentals because we've got house parties parking on Palm Boulevard right now. And we have rentals parking on Palm Boulevard. So the point of all of this is, the short answer is, hire a vendor do paid parking island-wide with the exception of our lot and make that free.
Do you think we would have to acquire DOT approval?
That's obviously is an issue. I've talked to Ms. Fregoso about that, and she says that we need to submit it to DOT, which is fine. We can submit it. I expect that they are going to deny it based upon the statute, which I firmly believe is unconstitutional for any number of reasons. But that brings that to a head. And instead of us being held captive to SCDOT, we solve that issue at the same time.
We've looked at this issue, I'll be right with you, as Desiree knows, several times over the past 8 to 10 years, especially the last 5 years. And there's just a lot of issues. I'm open-minded about exploring it, but do you do it with a private vendor, as they do in Wrightsville Beach? They have a private vendor handles all their parking issues. I called up there several years ago, and the council members are called aldermen, and I talked to a couple of them, like, we wouldn't touch it. It's just much better with a private vendor handling all of the parking issues. What their issue is with the state roads, I'm not sure, but if you know Wrightsville Beach, there's very little parking. I think every spot on Wrightsville Beach is metered. We have that, and then we have there's a lot of issues.
And
How do
North
you,
Myrtle Beach also
how do
does the
you,
same.
like, would you have kiosks on?
No, sir, it's all done by satellite. North Myrtle Beach does the exact same thing. They have no free parking in North Myrtle Beach. It's all, except for the state-owned roads, which there's no parking in state-owned roads. All other roads are paid parking, and it's done by satellite.
That's interesting, yeah. Doesn't sound like you've done your homework. Yes, ma'am.
So a couple things. You're correct. I think this is something that the city has looked at in previous years when the city worked on the now in place parking plan. At one point, I think, and some of these discussions predated me, so I'm talking based on what I've read. There was no appetite in charging for parking on Palm Boulevard at the time, but it was discussed that that was an option. Something to keep in mind, it's been referenced, so state law allows municipalities to charge for parking, but there is a requirement to offer free parking as well. So whatever plan we put together, we would need to identify free parking spaces. That'll be part, I'm sure, about, that a vendor could help us articulate what would make sense. I think I mentioned it last night at the meeting. There's a lot of value and benefit in outsourcing parking management, whether or not we charge our parking, which we'll go through that, if it's the will of the policy setting body, we can certainly explore that. But I think regardless, there are a lot of current expenses that the city has with hiring BSOs, the vehicles and the kiosk, and there is costs we're already incurring that I think could be allocated to, outsourcing that and taking that out of our hands. Whether we haven't done the complete analysis yet, whether there's any cost savings, but we anticipate there would be by doing that, by outsourcing it. So that's certainly something I'm interested in pursuing with council in the city for the following season. But certainly we could have a conversation based on your direction about pursuing a plan that incorporates paid parking on, in state-owned roads.
Well, we could also, it is a revenue producer, so we could also make sure that whatever we're charging covers our costs.
Well, we are generating revenue in our two lots and in Front Beach, which is the only place we currently charge for parking.
Yeah.
We got a lot of revenue.
Yeah,
Several
over
$100,000.
Over $1 million, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but besides the revenue, this is a safety issue. Palm Boulevard just isn't safe on big weekends. It just didn't. And we got, I've said this multiple times, we've got drunks and children running around happy to be at the beach, and they're walking out in traffic.
You know, one of the things that would help with us is to get our consultant traffic engineer to pull the accident data for Palm Boulevard and just report to us on what it's like for the last several years. You might want to go back 5 years or something, but that should be easy. The number of
Karen,
accidents,
go ahead, sorry,
where
go
they
ahead.
are, and what type of accidents we have on Palm. One more question I
ahead.
had too was for the chief. I know there were issues with enforcement, writing tickets and all, and who could and who couldn't. I know with the county park, there was an issue with that, but with what we're talking about, if we contracted out for management of our parking, would they be able to write citations, or how would that be handled?
Yes, ma'am. I'm actually a big proponent of outsourcing parking to an outsourced vendor. And they could, as long as we stipulate that this is how we're moving, they certainly can. You know, in any
Okay.
city employee, really, we could give a ticket book to and let them write parking tickets. They can't use police tickets, but they can use parking tickets for sure. We just can't write tickets in the county parking lot because it's not ours.
Okay, I see about that. Okay.
As I understand it, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Jamie. As I understand it, the vendor writes the ticket and enforces it at court. So at our city court, they show up. So there's, all that load is taken away from the police department.
And they would be correct. Once somebody receives a ticket, they would be contacting the company. They would, adjudicate, fix, address, collect the money, and then, essentially they would just report back to us whatever revenues or ticket. We don't call it ticket revenue, but ticket fees. And so that would be completely out of our hands. We currently, that's most of the traffic we have up here, obviously in the summer, as you can imagine, is related to parking citations. That would all be outsourced, and it would open up a lot of time and efficiencies for our current staff.
Probably the ladies upstairs would appreciate it too, at the window.
Many of
I think they
the
would.
companies will actually do the entire thing to include the resident permits, the parking passes. They take the whole, anything to do with parking, and it's all theirs to include kiosk maintenance, signs. So it's
That's
definitely
Wrightsville
frees
Beach.
up a lot of
Yeah.
staff time.
I just wanted to ask Blair, did you, you're talking about the big lot.
Yes, sir.
Did you have any thoughts on the smaller lot, which is, a lot of those spaces are leased on a yearly basis for people that work at the restaurants and the businesses?
Talking about behind the public safety. I was thinking just the big lot.
Okay. Okay. Chief, since we're talking about parking ideas, as a follow-up, I know that we've approached the county before. If you wouldn't mind reminding me of where that stands as far as our negotiations of trying to get the customers to pay on the way out instead of on the way in at the county lot.
I can answer that. I mean, as y'all know, the mayor has been very proactive in reaching out to other communities and working with the staff at making changes to traffic operations, not only in the county park, but with Mount Pleasant and Sullivan's Island. And the county has participated in those meetings. They had, we actually have a meeting coming up next month, early next month, to start our efforts again ahead of the season. And we're hopeful that we can get an update from the county on their efforts. They have been open about it. And last year, when we had our last meeting with them, they indicated that they may be able to implement something for this season and implement a parking sort of app. They had purchased it and they were looking at it for some of their other properties. And we asked if they could investigate the application in our county lot. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but they certainly seemed willing to have to have that exploratory conversation, and whether or not it would be implemented, we don't know yet, but we can certainly, that's part of the things that we're going to be discussing with them when we meet later.
When will that meeting be?
I think it's in the process of being scheduled.
Okay.
I think the mayor suggested first week of March, if I'm not.
Well, that's very
if I'm not
encouraging
mistaken.
that they'll at least talk about it. I don't think we had much luck in the past.
We've been talking about it for a long time, as you stated, so whether or not it could be implemented this year, we don't know yet.
They mentioned it like 6 or 8 months ago. You'd think they were reinventing the wheel, as long as it's taking, all it is an app
Right,
and a kiosk. You know,
right.
you park and pay like you do downtown and you can do it on your phone or with an app. And
Or
I don't know
can in
why
the
they
lot.
can't figure it out.
In
Huh?
our lot, you can do it.
Well, we do it downtown, yeah.
Very good. Anything else on parking ideas?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to address, since we're talking about short-term rentals, and we promised the community that we would look at enforcement, one of the big issues, of course, is parking. And I would just like to get a handle on what it is what the complaints are about it, what current enforcement policies are, and how we can improve what we have on the books now. It appears that the little research I've done, and Douglas, you can chime in if I'm not saying this right. On-site requirements for short-term rentals are based on two things, either the bedrooms or square footage.
Correct. It's based on the occupancy, which is driven by either bedrooms or square footage. That's correct.
Okay. And how high can it get? For 8 bedrooms, you could have 18 parking spaces? Is that my calculation right for that?
I haven't done the math, but that sounds correct. I sent an example to you, a house with an occupancy of 28 people would have a maximum number of 11 overnight cars allowed. So just to back up a little bit, the way that works is our ordinance establishes a max. There's no minimums.
A max of what?
A maximum of cars overnight only. So there's no maximum during the day. So if you had a party at a short-term rental, there's no limit on how many cars there could be there. But then there's an overnight maximum. So
Yeah.
once we hit the nighttime hours, they would have to bring it down to whatever requirement our ordinances establishes for those, and it's 1 car space for every 2.5 occupants approved to be at the house.
Okay, am I reading the wrong thing? This is short-term rentals, and it says maximum overnight occupancy, blah, 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 is the greater of, and number 1 is 2 people per bedroom plus 2 people. Okay, that's occupancy, I'm sorry. Okay, so this parking spaces is different from that. That's what I'm doing. So if you have a house with, because the second part of it with occupancy, do we have a maximum number of people in a house?
40, yes. 40 at any time.
Overnight?
And no, that's any time. And then there is an overnight that's driven by by the size of the house and whether or not they had a license in 2010. There's a fairly convoluted
Yeah, okay. We're not going to talk
scenario
about the
figuring out.
grandfathers one, yeah.
Right. But
Okay.
parking is always 1 space, a max of 1 space for every 2.5 people allowed by the convoluted occupancy ratio.
Okay, and you're saying that would probably, okay, that's where I'm going.
Is Real Property looking at this issue? Okay.
So, from my personal kind of opinion of dealing with this, the odd thing to me about complying with this maximum is what it ultimately does is if the police officers show up and they have 4 too many cars, the officers would say you have to get 4 cars off of your property, and the kind of easiest solution to that would be to put them in the right-of-way, put them on Palm Boulevard, which I don't know that that's any better. And am I, hearing kind of the conversation about the public spaces being overtaken, it might be actually worse to be driving cars off of the property because it sends them to public parking spaces. So it's a double-edged sword, kind of pick your poison of which is worse, the car being on the property and kind of self-contained, or the officers sending the cars to public spaces. I don't know that either of those is better than the other. Ideally, they just wouldn't bring so many cars, but our ordinances of establishing, maxes, that was the intent of our ordinance, was to kind of send the message of, hey, you have a limited footprint of what you can park here, but again, the workaround would be to just move them to public parking spaces.
Well, I think one of the issues is that these houses, especially for the houses, which would be what we're talking about, they're in residential areas. So I think rather than have, and I'm wondering whether it's, if it's more vehicles allowed at the house and they have space on the lot, and there's overflow into the street, into public parking in the public right-of-way, do we need to just tighten up those requirements on the public right-of-way? And if those cars go, I would rather have them along Palm Boulevard than I would along my residential street, that's for sure, have them all parked up. What is your feeling about this?
Well, I would just say the one thing to remember is that residential parking is from 9 to 6. So overnight, they can park on any residential street on the side without being in violation of a city ordinance. So if we tell them they can only have so many in the parking in the property, they can move it onto those residential streets. We don't have to make them move it to the parking lots. We don't have to make them move it to Palm. They can park anywhere that is a legal parking spot.
So first thing we might want to consider is making the parking in residential areas that's now limited residential parking during the day is make it limited to residential parking, permit parking 24/7. Is there what is the downside of that?
Well, what if you had like a cookout or an oyster roast or a couple of cousins visiting? You gonna give them a ticket?
There's parking passes. It's the convoluted thing now where don't you get a booklet or something like that you could use for guests or whatever that, I don't know whether that's the best idea either, but.
Yes,
It's a limited number you get, yeah.
Yeah, you could get up to 2 booklets every year from the police department, and they would be used for guests. Short-term rental owners can also get a hang tag that they should provide to their guests to use to park in the public right of way. I'm going to go back and look at some of the discussion several years ago, actually. Council discussed changing the hours, and there was a lot of pushback from the community about doing that.
Yep.
And that's why the city kept it from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's also, people from other places other than Isle of Palms that come and, go to the beach to, walk their dogs and, before 9 a.m. and after 6 p.m. So I think that the goal was to manage parking in the hours that there is peak traffic and peak utilization, which is 9 to 6.
That's absolutely correct. Well, we discussed this for months and months and months, and we settled on this.
And I think the other
There was
issue
big pushback
that
any
we-
other way.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say that the other issue was also enforcement. Having 24/7 enforcement was just something that just felt it's unmanageable for us to enforce parking island-wide 24/7.
Yep.
Clearly not something we can do with our resources. I'm sure if the city outsources, that's going to be an extra cost if you need to have somebody patrolling the entire community 24/7. We just don't see that from our perspective being an issue.
So-
Parking after 6 and before.
So
9.
you're saying that from the short-term rentals, that there really isn't an acute problem with too many vehicles parked at the houses now, overnight?
I wouldn't. We haven't looked into it. I can't say that. That's what I'm saying. I think we need to look and see what problem are we trying to solve. Is
Yeah.
it a property having too many vehicles in the driveway and what the problem with that is and whether or not we prefer to have the vehicles consolidated in a property versus having the vehicles being parked on the public right of way. I don't know what
Why
problem
don't
we're
we
trying
ask
to
the
solve.
real property committee to look at this and, and maybe they want to limit the number of cars at a short-term rental. I don't know.
Well, if you limit the cars to short-term rental, then that applies to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, whether you rent or not.
Well, you'd always have residential permit stickers that we all have on our cars now
What if
that would
you-
enable you to park on the right-of-way at any time.
Okay, so we have play
you got-
rehearsals at my house.
Yeah, I know, it's good, yeah.
Okay, so there's usually 6 or 8 cars, and they come after 6 because I don't want them to get tickets. So we're abiding by that rule, and I think we're just pushing it a little too far. Everything seems to be working fine right now.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what it is that that people were complaining about when they talk about short-term rentals and parking.
Okay, great.
So,
And I guess
don't
to
think we've
echo
defined
that,
that.
to understand it, we would want to know, is the problem too many cars at houses?
Mm-hmm.
Is the problem too many cars in public rights of way? For us to kind of focus on a solution, we would need to know which is the problem, because if they're going to bring all the cars and we think
Yeah.
that they were going to bring the same number of cars, what is the preferential place for them to park? If we're told that problem, we can work on a solution, but it's kind of a double-edged sword again.
Very good. Okay. We're moving on to item B, discussion of citizen request to install a 4-way stop sign at 29th Avenue and Waterway Boulevard. I'd like to ask the chief, what's the procedure there? Do you have to go through DOT or what's going on?
Yes, sir, we would have to request that through DOT, much like when we talked about the speed restriction or reduction, all that's got to be run through DOT. They would have to do a study. I think we had to do one for 25th as well, and they kind of lumped that in with the study that we already had going on, so we'd have to do a whole different study for 29th and Waterway, and then they would make the determination based off of what they find there.
Bill, would you like or not a recommendation from this committee to go to council with pushing forward with this, or what's your thoughts? You don't care?
I could go either way. I don't think it's going to impact us necessarily, but Waterway is a longer road. And it is a road where people do feel that there is an issue with speeding, and we do write a fair amount of tickets on Waterway. This could be something that helps reduce it, but it's also fairly close to 25th already, and that's something DOT is going to take into consideration, is how close it is to another 4-way stop.
Okay. Your thoughts, committee members, on this?
I have a couple of suggestions and thoughts about it. It looks like it's an appropriate location. The way that the request came into us from the community member was that it's a place where children cross to go to the playground, to the rec center. And that because of that, the 4-way stop would be a good idea. If you propose it to the South Carolina DOT, I'd suggest that there is a nursery school, I think, at the rec center, which I don't think those kids are going to be crossing, but you can maybe get a school crossing designation or something for it, which makes them more willing to do something like this, and actually put in a crosswalk there for anybody to use.
I would ask some of the questions I have. Wouldn't that be the same case at 27th and
Right.
28th? You know, I
Correct,
think
yeah.
we're
You'd want one location, but you wouldn't want it at all. So this one's been proposed.
there's no
You know,
sidewalk on any of those roads,
Right.
frankly. We can, as y'all know, DOT has approved as part of the connector study. One of the recommendations that they did was to make 25th and Palm a 4-way stop. There's already a stop sign on the avenue on the Waterway. We can make the request and see what they say. I think that, I don't know what their standards are between 4-way stops, how close they can be.
I think they're far enough apart. There shouldn't be, that won't be the first red flag, I guess. But what I was thinking, if we want it, I thought at 25th, we were going to go to a two-way stop, but on the minor street on 25th rather than Waterway, which would, again, maybe encourage people to speed more on Waterway. So if it was a four-way stop at 25th,
It's
and
a
we
four-way
kept
stop.
that, then what I would like is at 29th, you don't have just one stop sign on Waterway. If there's one, then people are looking for another. So if you have two, it's okay, I think, because you're still going to have vehicles that are anticipating another stop coming up. Right now, with only one, I don't know how many people run that stop sign now on Waterway, but I would imagine there's a tendency to do that. If not, then we're good both ways. So I think my opinion as a traffic engineer is it's a logical place to put a four-way stop. And I would suggest that you put a crosswalk in with it as well. And maybe even if you need an extra push for them, just say there's a playground/school nearby that would encourage safe crossing.
We
With
can
the
make the
stops.
request informally at the staff level and bring back any response to this committee. And based on what we hear back from DOT about what the process would be, you all can consider making a recommendation to council.
I think it's our duty on the Public Safety Committee to honor the citizens' request and at least make an inquiry.
We can do that.
Yeah, we shouldn't hold it up. Okay. We're going to item C, discussion of draft fiscal year 24, 10-year capital plan for police and fire. Y'all have the capital plan in front of you. And as is the police chief, and I guess Douglas, since the fire chief is not present, if you have any comments or anything you'd like us to pay special attention to, or anything at all?
No, I mean, this is the first draft of the 10-year capital plan. As you all know, we start with capital, and then next month we'll be discussing operational budget. For this upcoming year, we have the replacement of 2 patrol vehicles for $104,000, replacement of the existing pickup truck that is not in really good shape, and it's used by an animal control officer. We have that at $48,000. We have been talking, and council yesterday had the first conversation about moving the existing part-time code enforcement officer to full-time. That position will require a vehicle. They essentially are driving around the island all day enforcing code. So we are adding a truck there to our fleet to accommodate that role. We have a replacement of our computer servers for $48,000. This is something that we're working with our new IT group, VC3, and they're preparing a pretty comprehensive plan for all of our equipment and servers, and I think 2 of them require replacement this year. Next year, I'm sorry, for FY24. Replacement of radios for the police department at $7,600. One addition that was not included in last year's capital plan that we are including this year for $11,500 is the a license plate reader for the connector for investigative purposes. Sullivan's Island, I think, has installed one at Breach Inlet, and we are able to grab that information for, if the police department is looking for somebody, we'd be installing one at the connector to, support their investigations whenever they're looking for a suspect or somebody who did something bad. That would have a recurring annual $5,000 fee for the subscription of that software. We'll include that in the operational budget as well. And then we have the facilities maintenance line item. This is what we use for proactive maintenance efforts in all of our buildings. So you have $62,500 there for, which is half of the amount allotted to the public safety building, which they share with the fire department. For the fire department, we have 2 vehicles that are in the replacement schedule. One 2014 Ford F-150, another 2016 Ford F-150. They're both at 555.5. Radio replacement, that's also on a schedule for 20,000. A machine that helps for the self-contained breathing apparatus, mask testing. I believe that's something that we included in this year's budget, and we're just moving it to FY24, so it's been deferred, if I'm not mistaken. A medical monitor for carbon monoxide and oxygen. We have a placeholder here for when if the current machine fails, then would need to be replaced. We've included that. And then the final page in your packet is the continuation of the fire department's capital plan. We have the exhaust system for both stations. We included that in FY23. And we were going to pursue we were looking at potential grant opportunities for that. We've been working with our grant writer, and we have not been able to find one that could cover this expense. We have identified other capital needs that we've already submitted for federal funding for, so we can offset some of that cost. But we are moving that expense from FY23 to FY24, and it would be covered by the city. $50,000, this is something that we have already applied for a grant to cover 75% of the cost for physical agility testing equipment. So 50,000 would be the total cost, but our expense, if we are successful in securing that grant, our cost would only be 25% of the total. And then we have $30,000 for replacement of the HVAC units. We have that as a placeholder for in the event of failure. They're relatively new, so we don't anticipate that they would require any replacement. But again, we like having that placeholder there. And then line item 117, facilities maintenance. This is the 1% of the insured value of both Fire Station 2 and the 50% of public safety building. So this is our first draft. We're going to be meeting next week with the department heads to work on the operational budget. If there's anything that you'd like for us to consider and include, change, and get you more information off, please let us know, and we'll have that ready for your next meeting.
Yes, sir.
2 questions. Under line item 59, the license plate reader. Chief, I know at one point last year, we had a resident group that was interested in helping fund that. Did that ever go anywhere?
There were some conversations, but I don't know what happened with it. I don't know if it just kind of stalled out or what
Okay.
really happened. But we did talk about it and meet.
Was Lieutenant Forsyth talking to him, or you, or?
It was Lieutenant Forsyth and Sergeant Storin.
Okay.
Sergeant Storin is the license plate reading guru, so we let him kind of lead those conversations.
Okay, all right. I mean, I think that the will is still there to do something, and so that might be worth going back and seeing if they're wanting to write a check, and if the sergeant can call me, and I'll put pressure on them if necessary. Thank you, Chief. The second question is line item 108, the exhaust system. I had originally voted for that based upon that we were going to be able to get grant money for a lot of it. I would like to, with Chief Oliveris, whenever he's available, maybe revisit that because of our climate. I've had a lot of people question me as to why do we need this? Our climate is so mild that we don't really need to have the trucks running in an enclosed area. So I would at least like to revisit that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I have something after we finish this discussion that I'd just like to add.
Is it on the agenda?
I think it was in our packet. It's actually the SCDOT report on the connector, and I just had a couple of notes that I had sent in that I wanted to enter into the record.
Yes, it's not on the, I don't think we included the report in the packet. We did share with council once we received it from DOT.
Right.
We can certainly, you can add any comments and we can include them in the packet, but since it's not on the agenda, you all would need to vote in the positive, a 2/3 vote to add an item to the agenda for discussion.
I've already shared it with staff, so if you want to make it part of the public record.
We can share it with the members of council, Councilmember Anderson, if you would like. We can share the comments
Yeah.
we've received, we can share them with them.
Okay.
I prefer to stick to the agenda. We've had some issues in the past, and with the people saying, well, you're not being transparent if you add something we didn't know was going to be on there. And they, just for transparency's sake, I would prefer that we go Desiree's route and just share it with council members, and then bring it up at the 28th meeting
Okay.
instead of add it. Okay,
So I'd like to add this to the 28th meeting agenda, please.
Okay?
great. Thank you very much. And I guess that's it, unless anybody else has any questions or a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are off the record at 10:36.